What if I told you that one of America's deadliest serial killers wasn't a man, but a woman who stalked lonely highways, killing 7 men in less than 2 years? A woman whose chilling story blurs the line between victim and villain? This is the terrifying truth behind Aileen Wuornos, the highway killer whose life was as dark and twisted as the crime she committed. Born into abuse and abandonment, Eileen's childhood was scarred from the start. By age 14, she was already fighting to survive on the streets. But few knew the reasons behind her violent rampage wouldn't just shock the nation. They'd inspire a movie and leave us asking, was she a monster or a woman pushed too far by a cruel world? Aileen Carol Wuornos was born on a leap year, February 29th, 1956, in cold, gray Michigan. By age 4, her world had already come crashing down. Her father, a convicted pedophile, hanged himself in prison before she'd ever met him. Her mother left her and her brother, Keith, to be raised by their grandparents. But Aileen called her grandfather abusive, emotionally, physically, even sexually, according to court records and her own haunting confessions. As a child, Aileen was a pariah. She slept outside, scavenged food from dumpsters, and by age 11, was engaging in sex acts for cigarettes and spare change. It was survival, but nobody seemed to care. No teachers, no neighbors, no safety net. By her early teens, Eileen's life spiraled. She dropped out of school, was pregnant by 14 after an alleged rape, gave up her baby, and was kicked out. Homeless, alone, forced to hitchhike across America. Aileen became a drifter, surviving as a sex worker by truck stops, sleeping under bridges, sometimes living in the woods around Daytona Beach. Florida, for Aileen, was a land of broken dreams and lost souls. The year is 1989. Florida's highways are swamped with tourists, salesmen, and truck drivers. Between December 1989 and November 1990, 7 men picked up a hitchhiking Wuornos, and none lived to tell the tale. Peter Seams, Richard Mallory, Troy Burress, Charles Carskadden, David Spears, Charles Humphreys, Walter Antonio, each found dead in remote woodlands, shot with a .22 caliber pistol, sometimes robbed, sometimes left with their pockets turned out. Wuornos claimed she killed in self-defense, that each man tried to assault her while she was working as a prostitute. Investigators, though, pieced together another story: 7 dead men, all shot execution style, most with little evidence of struggle. The press exploded with headlines: Highway Killer, Monster, the rare female serial killer who hunted men across Florida. It was a pattern law enforcement couldn't ignore. But what made Wuornos truly notorious wasn't just the murders. It was her transformation in the public eye. To some, she was a merciless predator. To others, she was a broken woman, the product of abuse and neglect, failed by every system designed to protect her. Police finally closed in thanks to brilliant detective work and a lucky break. A pawnshop receipt, a stolen car, and most damning, Eileen's confidant, Tyria Moore, a former motel maid, and the woman Wuornos loved. Police used Tyria to record phone calls with Aileen, coaxing a confession from the haunted killer. "I did it," Aileen admitted. "I'm so sorry." The trial began in Volusia County, Florida, in January 1992. Cameras flashed, reporters filed in. Wuornos, in her grim prison jumpsuit, looked a world away from the abandoned little girl of Michigan. She confessed to killing all 7 men, but claimed self-defense. The prosecution painted her as a bloodthirsty highway predator who killed for thrills and cash. Jurors didn't take long. After less than 2 hours, Aileen Wuornos was found guilty and sentenced to death. She would sit on Florida's death row for 10 long years, the focus of documentaries, books, and eventually the Oscar-winning film, Monster. But the story doesn't end there. Even in prison, Eileen's tale twisted and turned. She gave explosive interviews, alternately expressing regret and lashing out. She claimed the guards were poisoning her food, that she was framed, that she needed to die as soon as possible. On October 9th, 2002, at age 46, Aileen Wuornos was executed by lethal injection in Florida State Prison. Her final words? "I'll be back like Independence Day. With Jesus, June 6th, like the movie, Big Mother Ship, and all. I'll be back." The world watched, riveted. But what really drove Aileen Wuornos to kill? Was she the ultimate predator, or was she society's forgotten victim, crushed by a system that never once gave her a chance? And did the police and public ever uncover the real story about those 7 murders? Or do secrets still lurk in the shadows, just out of reach? Aileen Wuornos was in custody by January 1991, caught after police traced a pawn camera and a palm print in a stolen car. But investigators needed more than circumstantial evidence. They turned to Eileen's closest companion, her girlfriend, Tyria Moore. What happened next would unravel the entire case and force America to question everything it thought it knew about good, evil, and insanity. Detectives convinced Tyria Moore to help, but it came at a devastating cost. Over 6 harrowing days, police hid Tyria in a motel, coaching her to call Aileen from a payphone. Imagine the pressure. Tyria, terrified, her voice trembling as she begged Aileen to do the right thing live over the phone. Aileen, sensing the end, began to crack. The entire world would soon hear her confession, recorded in chilling detail. "I did it, Ty. I'm so sorry. I just want to save your ass." With the confession in hand, authorities pieced together the timeline. 7 victims between December 1989 and November 1990. Each lured off the highway, supposedly for sex. In Eileen's words, each killing was an act of self-defense. She claimed her first victim, electronics store owner Richard Mallory, violently assaulted her. A story the press doubted, but one that revealed the deep trauma behind each crime. Richard Mallory, murdered November 30th, 1989. Wuornos said Mallory wasn't just a client. He violently tried to sexually assault her after she picked him up in Florida. She described him as aggressive, forcing himself on her, leaving her no choice but to shoot him multiple times in desperate self-defense. David Spears, killed on May 19th, 1990. Wuornos claimed Spears turned hostile during their encounter, either pulling a weapon on her or threatening serious harm. She said she fired her gun to protect herself from an abusive and dangerous situation. Charles Carskadden, shot dead on May 31st, 1990. As with Spears, Wuornos said Carskadden became violent, especially when she refused to have sex without payment. She insisted he attempted to assault her, prompting her to act in defense. Troy Burress, killed July 30th, 1990. Wuornos alleged that Burress threatened her with violence, possibly trying to hit or sexually assault her, forcing her to use deadly force to stop him. Charles Humphreys, murdered September 11th, 1990. According to Wuornos, Humphreys was yet another man who attacked or threatened her. She said she shot him after he made a move that endangered her safety. Peter Seams, June 1990, body never found. Wuornos included Seams in her list of victims, maintaining that, like the others, he attempted to harm or abuse her, justifying her shooting him in self-defense. And finally, Walter Antonio, murdered November 19th, 1990. Wuornos said Antonio was violent during their encounter and that shooting him was her last resort to prevent assault. Throughout her confessions, Wuornos repeatedly emphasized that she killed these men because she feared for her life, portraying each shooting as an act of survival against violent and threatening attacks. Despite varying details, her core defense was that every killing was motivated by self-defense against men who tried to rape, injure, or kill her. Prosecutors and investigators, however, disputed these versions, citing patterns suggesting execution-style killings rather than defensive actions. Each case was eerily similar: bodies abandoned in rural woods, shot with the same small-caliber pistol, sometimes undressed, wallets missing. Fingerprints, shell casings, and pawn receipts became pieces of a puzzle that would seal Eileen's fate. But investigators, and later the jury, saw a pattern: a serial killer hunting for cash, not simply a woman fighting for her life. The courtroom became a battle of public image. Prosecutors painted Wuornos as a remorseless killer, motivated by money and rage. The defense, meanwhile, brought up decades of sexual abuse, neglect, and untreated mental illness, claiming Aileen was a battered woman who finally snapped. The testimony was riveting. Tyria, the woman Aileen loved most, took the stand and told the world she had no knowledge of the murders, and then, as Aileen watched in tears, recounted their conversations. For many, it was the ultimate betrayal. For Aileen, perhaps, the only way Tyria could ever escape the past. In dramatic courtroom fashion, Aileen would ultimately plead guilty to all 7 murders, never retracting her story of self-defense, though her explanations shifted in later years. "I'm sorry about the 7 guys. I'm sorry, but it was them or me. You know what I mean? I just couldn't take it anymore." But haunting questions lingered. At times, Aileen seemed desperate for execution, claiming she was being tormented by prison staff, saying she needed to die to get off this planet. At other moments, her accounts confused even seasoned reporters and criminal profilers. Was she telling the whole truth about the murders? Or, as some suggested, was the reality even darker than anything the courts revealed? Aileen Wuornos was executed on October 9th, 2002, at the age of 46. Her story captivated the nation, dominating headlines, documentaries, and the Oscar-winning film Monster. But for all the media frenzy, for every article and interview, the core questions still haunt true crime followers. Were all 7 killings really self-defense? Or was Aileen a true predator? Did her childhood of unspeakable abuse make the violence inevitable? Or did the system fail a person who might have been saved? But just when you think the Wuornos case couldn't get darker, new evidence would surface. Fresh doubts, alternate theories, and whispers about other crimes never solved that could rewrite everything we believe about Aileen Wuornos and the legacy of female serial killers in America. We all thought we understood Aileen Wuornos, the desperate drifter who confessed to killing 7 men. But as the years passed and her execution faded into history, chilling new secrets were uncovered. Tonight, we pulled back the curtain. What did investigators really find when they reopened the Wuornos case? Could there have been more victims or buried truths that never made the headlines? Let's rewind. Aileen Wuornos' confession in 1991 sealed her fate. She told police, "I killed those men and I'd kill again. I hated humans for a long time." But as appeals wound through the courts, journalists like Michelle Gillen began asking hard questions few dared raise. One, in particular, broke the case wide open. It turns out Aileen's first victim, Richard Mallory, wasn't the upstanding businessman prosecutors claimed. Mallory had spent time in a hospital for the criminally insane after a brutal attempted rape in his youth, a fact never revealed at trial. Documents showed a history that eerily fit Aileen's own account, that Mallory violently assaulted her before she shot him in terror. The question, if Aileen's desperate story was partly true about Mallory, how much else did the public and police miss? In the months that followed, the bodies of 6 more men surfaced between June and November 1990. David Spears, Charles Carskadden, Troy Burress, Charles Humphreys, Peter Seams, who was never found, and Walter Antonio. Each shot multiple times, stripped of their possessions, left on the roadside. The pattern was undeniable, but the stories clashed. Was this calculated murder or relentless self-defense born of trauma? In prison, Aileen grew unpredictable. Sometimes she showed remorse, sometimes unstoppable rage. Soon, she began to claim she was framed, poisoned, and, shockingly, hinted there were crimes she never admitted to. At her final hearing, Aileen exploded. "I killed those men as cold as ice, and I'd do it again." This wasn't the battered woman defense from trial. It was a confession with a new, frightening edge. Years later, public records requests and surging true crime interest turned up more revelations. Secret files confirmed what some suspected. Police found dozens of pawned items beyond those traced to Aileen's 7 known victims. None could be conclusively tied to missing persons. But rumors persist that more men vanished along the highways in 1989 and 1990, their fate never proven. We cross-referenced every open missing persons report with Wuornos' timeline. We never found concrete proof of more murders, but the truth is, not every drifter or trucker was ever identified. To this day, we can't be certain Wuornos told us everything. As the anniversary of her execution passed, writers and podcasters questioned the verdict. Was Aileen Wuornos an irredeemable predator, or the ultimate victim of a brutal system who sometimes snapped back at her own abusers? Did the failure to reveal Mallory's criminal past deny her a fair trial? And what about the whispers of additional missing men, pawn shop secrets, police cover-ups? If even a sliver of her story was true, what else did we never discover? The story of Aileen Wuornos proves that in true crime, every answer brings more questions. In the shadows along America's highways, the darkness sometimes never lifts. But this isn't the end. Feel free to like, share, and comment what you think about this case. In our next episode, we move from Florida to the Midwest, where another woman, Belle Gunness, left behind a farm of bodies, a mysterious disappearance, and a string of unsolved murders that still baffles investigators. Was she America's deadliest female serial killer? Or did she escape and vanish forever? Find out, because what happened at Hell's Bells farmhouse might haunt you long after the screen goes dark.